Very good. So we have today with us Marlyn Brownrigg, who has graciously agreed to appear and help us out in our project and our interviews here. Thank you very much for that, Marlyn. I'm going to begin with some background questions for context, which I like to do with everybody else, because it just gives us an idea of who you are, where you're from, and what your experience has been. So to start the process off, I'm going to ask you where your parents were born.
My mother was born in the eastern townships of Quebec, and my father was born in eastern Ontario,
Okay. And where were you born?
in Montreal.
Okay. And where did you receive your education? Elementary, secondary, and any post-secondary?
All in Montreal.
Okay, very good. And what is or was your occupation?
I work part-time for a not-for-profit organization
Okay. And where do you live now?
in Pointe Claire, West Island of Quebec, of Montreal.
All right. Now to get, I guess, more to the meat of the matter here, we're going to ask some questions about your experience living in Quebec today, starting off with what is the best thing in your experience about living in Quebec today?
Well, I would have to say the joie de vivre of the Quebec people and how much they cherish work-life balance as opposed to some other places I've been. More living for today and like to have a good time, and a very warm and gregarious place to live once you get to know everybody.
Okay. And describe your relationship to Quebec in a single word.
I would say at this point tenuous, more because our kids have moved away. They're living in Ontario and they will not be coming back. And so we have no family here, no close family. And with the recent political shift, I wouldn't say that I want to retire here anymore. And so probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we probably will be moving to Ontario where the rest of my family is.
Where do you feel most at home in Quebec? For example, in communities based on language, culture, profession, or geographic location?
Because we have ties to the Eastern Townships, we feel very comfortable there. Also in our community in Pointe Claire, where, it's a very small, in the 37,000 people, but you get to know a lot of people through being involved in the community. It's very easy to get involved. And I have to say, unfortunately, we probably don't venture out to other communities very much, just because our family is more in the Ottawa, Toronto area. So I would have to say it's more of a, not even a language thing, but just where you've made your friends and where your friends are and where you have ties from the past.
Fair enough. Now, the next question, I'm going to give you a little bit of background because some people have difficulty with it. It's a two-part question.
Okay.
Second part, people have said to me, well, when you say official definition, according to who? My answer to that is that it's any official definition that you perceive. It could be by the government. It could be by, say, in some work experience that you've had. It could be what you see on the media. So whatever you deem to be what the official definition of Quebec. So having said that, it's a two-part question. I'm going to ask both parts. So how would you define a Quebecer or Quebecois? And do you think the official definition in Quebec includes you?
I would say anybody who chooses or has chosen to live here and stay here is a Quebecer. The official definition, I guess, depends on what you hear in the media. I think officially is not the same as how people feel that they're welcomed. It doesn't really make sense, but I think if you were to look at legalese, I don't think maybe the Anglo population is considered in there, but I think, and as a general rule, we are included in there.
Okay.
But there's a difference between what's reported, what's legalese, and what's happening on the ground.
Okay. Now, has your sense of identity as a Quebecer or Quebecois changed over the years? And if so, in what ways?
I would say yes, because I find that with the shrinking numbers of Anglos in Quebec, that the identity is changing. Just basically on a numerical demographic level. And I think because everybody is intermarrying with Francophone culture or Allophone culture, that the traditional Anglo definition of what an Anglo was or used to be or is perceived as no longer exists. It's more of a melting pot.
Okay. And what are some of the most difficult things about living in Quebec today?
I would say continuous labeling, as I would say, as an Anglophone or the Allophone, as sort of the enemy or the having undue influence over Quebecois culture, and the number of new laws that have been passed. It's just draining. It's just it's more negative. I did move away for almost a year to London, Ontario when my mother got transferred in the late 70s. And I moved back and everybody was moving away from Montreal and I came back. And I was quite a defender of some of the laws Quebec was passing, but I don't defend Quebec anymore. I've gotten to the point now that I'm jaded, I would say, and negative, more negative.
That brings us to the next question, which you partially have answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway and allow you to elaborate. In recent years, Quebec's Francophone majority has identified a number of linguistic and cultural threats. Which of these concerns do you share and support, and which of these concerns make you feel excluded or targeted?
I think my theory is that once, the whole cultural threat to the Francophone population started way back when, I don't know, cable came to Quebec or people got, the channels from the US. I think the Allophone and Anglo population in Quebec is not the threat to the French language. It's the global community, the access to, things from the US, from all over Europe. And I think it's because what the government thinks they can control, that's what the Anglo and Allo community are targeted. But it's being very inward looking, because you can't go and cut off internet or YouTube from other places. They're controlling what they can. And I find that we're being targeted, but we are very small. We're a pea in a giant pot of soup. Like, they're doing it to please their base, and it's not going to make any difference in the end. It's just going to make people who live here angry. That's my theory.
Okay, well, you've touched on some interesting issues there. So I will ask you this question then. What is the biggest problem facing Quebec, and how, in your experience, do you think it could be resolved?
I think they're not looking, the government isn't focusing on the global vision and the fact that it's a global society now and people can move wherever they want. And that people don't operate in their own little bubble anymore, that everything is, whether it's trade or economy or anything, is all interconnected worldwide now. So I think their vision is insular. And I think they need to focus on the economy and to keep anybody, whether it's the youth staying here and not moving elsewhere. And I'm not just going to say Anglo or Allo youth. I think a lot of young French Canadians are also moving for better opportunities. And I think, unfortunately, with the low birth rate and the declining, the number of seniors, that probably we're going to be in a worse economic mess than we are now, as far as labor shortage, things like that. I think, I also think that a lot of the politicians, their kids are probably in a private school where they're learning English, French, Mandarin, Spanish, and it's a do what I say, but not what I do attitude when it comes to their own families. And I wish someone would do a study on that. Get funding for that.
Okay, now, the next question, you're probably wondering how we came about this. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to see the Guy Rogers documentary, What We Choose to Remember.
No, it's on my list though.
Oh, good. Well, I have unabashedly, with Guy's permission, borrowed this from that documentary. He used this tool. It's a visual tool. It's very effective. The showing of fingers. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question and ask you to use by a show of fingers on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being weak, 10 being very strong. How strongly do you feel that the joys of living in Quebec outweigh the challenges by a show of fingers?
6.
Excellent. Very good. So, having said all the above and asked all the questions, is there anything else that you would like to say about your sense of identity or belonging in Quebec?
No, I think I've said it all. I expanded on some of the questions, so.
Well, very good. Thank you, Marlyn, for allowing me to interview you today and being part of this project. It's very much appreciated. And it was great to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off the recording now.